Torture methods. Now, imagine you were being told you're about to be tortured. Good thing you didn't live in the medieval period. Some context is that some of these methods that are about to be mentioned within this medieval period have been invented back in the ancient world, although it did not become popular until this medieval period, which is why we start our timeline here. Torture methods were used on those who committed crimes, obviously. Some occasions being held in public in order to humiliate a victim. Some of those methods, including the brazen bowl, in which a victim would be tossed into a steel-made bowl and burned alive, alongside saw torture, where a victim was held upside down and slowly sawed in half until they died. Some methods, however, took place in prisons and dungeons, such as the rack, where prisoners would be tied up and slowly stretched and pulled apart until they confessed. That's if they decided to confess. In addition, the Judas cradle is where a prisoner was also tied up, except they were forced to sit on a pyramid-shaped point on their rear end until they died or died from infection sooner or later. And one that gives us all the most creeps, rat torture. However, rat torture had many different approaches, which it had one main purpose, usually a confession. One of these approaches, however, was to put rats in a bucket on top of a human skin, usually around their chest or their stomach. Hot coal would be placed on top of the bucket in order to heat up the bucket. Then the rats would have no other choice to dig their way out other than the human skin. So as prisoners were held down and slowly watched as their skin be eaten up by rats, they were pressured to confess or die with their secret. Another approach of this rat torture is to place a human in a very cramped small room filled with rats. And sooner or later, both the rats and the human would be driven mad. Methods like these we would see slowly become less popular and used throughout time, and in World War II, all physical tortures mentioned before had been banned. Throughout the late 20th century, numerous techniques were put into use, with methods such as the cold cell, in which a prisoner was placed in a small windowless cell with the AC turned on to the max. The cold cell was first used during the Vietnam War, after a highly Viet Cong officer had been captured, where he would be put in a windowless cell with the AC full blast for 4 straight years. Prisoners occasionally would be put in naked or have very little clothing in order to make the AC effective. And some countries even use this technique till this day. Speaking about present day, in 2004, the CIA had adopted an old method of waterboarding in order to interrogate prisoners, although most of the time they just went unconscious. Waterboarding was when a towel was placed over a prisoner's head, while they poured water all over their face, which the towel would prevent the prisoner from breathing. So the prisoners had experienced what had been described as drowning. Also in 2004, another method of torture was introduced, white room torture, better known as white torture, where a prisoner would be placed in a soundproof all-white room in all-white clothes. As peaceful as it seems, this punishment would quickly lead to hallucinations, as the victims stayed there longer. Typically, they were kept in there for months to even years. Advisors have claimed that once outside the room, psychological consequences become permanent, leaving the victim mentally traumatized. Although this method would only last till the August of that year, in which it was introduced in January of 2004. Thank God. And finally, a method you would least expect, music torture. Before you think this is just some karaoke or music party, trust me, it's not. Or at least the longer the process continued. Music torture, in fact, is actually used by a lot of governments, and it's exactly like it sounds. Imagine you would be placed in a room, and you got to choose whether or not you got to listen to Drake or Taylor Swift. That's great, because you don't get to choose anyways. You would be placed in a room and forced to listen to whatever music they play. Now, you might be thinking this is still more of a vibe than torture, but the moment they start blasting country music, I don't think you'll be enjoying it anytime soon. Overall, as time progressed, we see how ancient and medieval torture was more gruesome and painful compared to the modern-day torture, which was more in the head. I mean, I can't be the only one who'd rather listen to country than watch rats eat me alive. Anyways, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.